ora koutou, and welcome to what is our final seminar for the year and probably for the series. And it's lovely to see you all here. And it's nice if we'll do some, there we are. We'll start with a karakia, so please feel free to join in. Kia hora
Ora
te
te marino,
kia whakapapa
pauna
ngā
no
mo
te
te moana,
moana,
he
hei
hua rahi
huarahi
tā
a
tātou
tātou
a
I te
rangi
rangi
nei,
nei,
aroha,
aroha atu,
aroha
aroha
mai,
mai,
tātou,
tātou, ia
tātou
tātou katoa,
katoa, hui e,
ie
tā
tai ki e.
So today, this is what we're briefly going to go over. I'm going to do the introductions, and then Susanne and Giedre are going to do their presentation for us, and we'll have some questions and some discussion. So when it happens, here we are, it's going to happen any minute. Here we are. So first of all, I'm just acknowledging our host, Ngā Ara Whetū, and Ngā Ara Whetū are hosting the recordings of the seminar. So it means that people can go in and listen to the recording at a later date. And as you can see, they are our transdisciplinary university-wide research centre, which is looking at ways of creating sustainable futures and also building those collaborations, which in actual fact align really closely with the aim of our project, which was all about building this research network, looking at ways and approaches that would facilitate the teaching and learning for a sustainable world, and also, again, establishing some collaboration across faculties and within the community. So it's our 8th seminar, and it's my great pleasure this afternoon to welcome Dr. Susanne Pratt and Dr. Giedre Kilgyte. I got it right?
Kilgyte.
Kilgyte, sorry, I didn't practice enough. And both Giedre and Susanne are from the University of Technology in Sydney, and they're with the Transdisciplinary School. And Susanne's interests are as an educator, researcher, and artist working at the intersection of foresight, ecological change, creativity, and transformative learning. And her research explores participatory futuring to inspire environmental and change in the present. And I was really impressed to read that your creative work, Susanne, has been internationally exhibited. So hopefully you might have something to show us, in terms of your creative work. And Giedre is also in the Transdisciplinary School, and her research focuses on transforming university education to advance more sustainable and socially just futures. And she's particularly interested in how different perspectives and relationships across boundaries can be leveraged to create that third space. The third space is environments where difference, experimentation, and co-creation are embraced for mutual learning and new ways of thinking and creativity. So their presentation this afternoon is called Transdisciplinary Curriculum and Pedagogies, Fostering Positive Social and Environmental Impact. And I will now stop sharing my screen and hand over to Susanne and Giedre to make a start.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Sally. Hopefully that's all sharing good for you. Beautiful. So really appreciate being invited to be part of this exciting seminar series. I'm an alumni of University of Auckland through Elam School of Fine Arts and have been based at the University of Technology Sydney now for the last 8 years within Transdisciplinary School in its various evolutions with my fabulous colleague and collaborator, Giedre Kilgyte. So we're super excited to share a bit about what we've been doing as part of the different evolutions and journey within Transdisciplinary School around transdisciplinary curriculum and pedagogies for fostering positive social and environmental change. We're super keen to connect with and chat with you and ensure we have plenty of discussion as part of this session as well to understand a bit more about the different initiatives and work that you're doing there and where there might be potential connections to leverage and build on as part of that as well. So to that end, really welcome and invite in the chat to just post things as we're going, so that we can pick up on those kind of questions and things towards the end. And simultaneously, since I think very happy to pause at different points if there are areas that you want to sort of lean into real time, we can do that as well. So is there anything, Giedre, did you want to say anything else before we kick off? Perfect, cool. So as is the custom within Sydney and Australia, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement of country, and acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from Gadigal country here in Sydney, and acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation upon whose ancestral lands I'm joining you from today, and also where our university campus stands, and pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. And also I saw recently, which sounds like fabulous news, University of Auckland is ensuring that every single student does a course on the Treaty of Waitangi. So I thought that's really incredible to have as part of the initiatives that you're doing there going forward. And the lands that sort of grew me up were along the Waikato River in Aotearoa, New Zealand, in Hamilton or Tangaheri. So in terms of the key things that we're going to explore today as part of this seminar series, is starting with transdisciplinary practices, and then we'll talk a bit about the work that we've been doing around transdisciplinary capabilities, which has been about integrating and understanding the kind of consolidating work around the capabilities that we're developing with students through our transdisciplinary programs, and also, more importantly, as part of a research project and a large survey with alumni, to see how those capabilities are actually landing out in organizations and communities and in different places, and to see what the differences are between what can be mobilized in those sites and where we can support and understand shifts to support those larger social and environmental impacts and changes. And then finally, ending with a bit of discussion around a special issue that Giedre and I, along with two colleagues, are co-editing for the Journal of Higher Education Research and Development, called Educating for Societal Transitions, and share a bit about some of the themes that are emerging there, which are relevant to this work around thinking about transdisciplinary education. So in terms of setting a bit of the scene and the context, wanted to start by sharing a bit about where we are based at University of Technology, Sydney. So I'll hand over to Giedre to share on this.
Thanks, Susie. So as you might know, University of Technology Sydney is a large metropolitan university in the very center of the city. We have a pretty central campus, which is somewhat similar to University of Auckland, I guess, but we are a University of Technology, so we are not a sandstone university, and therefore we have a really strong focus on innovation and working with organizations and partnerships in the tech central precinct, where UTS is located in Ultimo in Sydney. And perhaps similar to Auckland University as well, and New Zealand discourse about higher education, UTS is very much driven by this employability discourse. So the vision for our university and our graduates is that we will graduate people who will be prepared for the world of work and will be able to contribute to the future as future disciplinary experts and professionals and future leaders in industries and professions. And we also have a strong commitment to environmental and social justice through positioning ourselves as a public university that has a accountability and commitment to advance the social causes and ensure that we move towards sustainable society. So these things probably are playing out across the world globally in universities and probably will be quite familiar to you. Susie, perhaps next slide. And so in terms of transdisciplinarity, UTS has a really long history in that. And it started in 1997 with the Institute for Sustainable Futures, which was a research institute that also had and still has a really vibrant higher degree research education program with lots of PhDs and Masters by Research students exploring that idea of sustainable futures. We also 2014, we launched a Bachelor of Creative Intelligence and Innovation, which became extremely popular and very innovative degree that went on to win a lot of learning and teaching awards nationally and internationally, and is still seen as a kind of a flagship degree that attracts students to UTS and adds this additional dimension to the kinds of graduates that we are creating through education at UTS. And based on that success of the Bachelor of Creative Intelligence and Innovation, actually the very Transdisciplinary School was established as a pan-university entity that actually hosts all these transdisciplinary programs, and that's where Susie and I work. We also had a Master of Creative Intelligence and Strategic Innovation program, which was a postgraduate program exploring similar themes and methodologies and ways of thinking. And then similar to University of Auckland, in 2022, we launched a TD electives program, which is the similar aspiration of enabling every undergraduate student at UTS to develop that transdisciplinary capability. And the latest iteration of this is we also have the BCII starting in University of Arizona. And Susie actually just returned from Arizona recently, where she delivered one of the subjects there. And I guess this will be super familiar to you all, but the reason why we have this need for transdisciplinarity is because of the kinds of world we live in today. So the challenges we face, open, complex, dynamic, and networked. So none of the issues and challenges that we face can be solved or addressed from one disciplinary perspective, and that's where transdisciplinarity comes in. And TD School is positioned in the very middle of it all. As I mentioned, it's a pan-university hub driven by that idea of innovation and collaboration across faculties, and also in acknowledgement that our students are graduating in the world that is changing and that they need to develop this capacity to adapt and continually evolve their careers and ways of thinking as the world is changing around us today. And also TD School hosts a whole range of different programs from undergraduate to postgraduate, and also a research program alongside as well. And so broadly, the curriculum is underpinned by the idea of a T-shaped graduate. So students usually develop a disciplinary depth in a UTS existing degree, so whether it's business or design or science, and then through these different programs and experiences, they also develop that ability to collaborate across differences as well.
And so after providing that sense of the context, shifting to the kind of what we do in practice around that. And some of the curriculum at UTS, we think about complexity-informed, action-oriented, around the emphasis on creative problem solving, but also real-world challenge-based, and learning in collaboration with various partners. So we bring in, for example, at the University of Arizona, have been working with the Red Cross around response and recovery from natural disasters. And so students have been looking at that in relation to heat. And it's also really nice that we work with Red Cross here in Australia as well. And sort of a mix from startups to government to industry partners such as Atlassian or Oricon or others. And there's the emphasis on thinking about social innovation, but really a values-led approach. So how do we create and deliver value beyond just financial value, shifting from extractive modalities to more regenerative futures, and a real emphasis on the role of creativity within that. And so the BCII program was the course director for that is Bimla Hunt, who is a fiction narrative writer. And so we bring in a range of different colleagues with different skills who support both that cross-disciplinary flourishing and embed the experiential and embodied learning pedagogies within that. And as you can see in the blue, those are some of the kinds of sessions or things that we do, such as Plato capitalism or method sandpits or futures arena and simulations. And we'll dive a bit deeper into some specific examples of that so you can see what that looks like. And here is the sort of overview of what the BCII looks like to give you a sense of the kind of scaffolding of it. So it's 3 years alongside their core degree, and then the final year is a dedicated 4th year where they're immersed in a studio and have capstones and other programs alongside that, and running from their first subject, which really emphasizes staying with the trouble, staying in the problem space. How do you ask beautiful questions? Shifting to creative practice and methods, and then values-led approaches to innovation, creativity and complexity to think about systems thinking and complexity theory, and then moving to leading innovation, and finally initiatives and entrepreneurship within those 3 years in block mode, winter and summer schools. So they do it as intensives as 2-week subjects where you have all of the students from the 25 different core degrees at UTS and above, such as midwifery, design, architecture, building, business, science, as Giedre mentioned. So we have the highlights from TD School Research and Practice, which we'll just dive into here with reflexivity and real world impact, collaboration and integration, creativity and adaptation, and futuring and complexity. And we'll share a couple of those examples to kind of bring that to life for you.
And just to also add to what Susie said about BCII, much of our research is actually focused or explores what happens in BCII with the students in class, but also after graduation, because it's our longest standing program. So it's over 10 years that the program has been running. So we have 5 cohorts of people who have gone on and graduated. And I think that's also the most immersive, intense, and so students do a second degree basically alongside their disciplinary degree. So many of the examples that we share today will be from BCII because it's kind of quite an exciting, playful, creative space. Whereas I know that Marie's interest is particularly in TD electives, which is, or, you know, that kind of the general elective space where you might have just one subject and you might just dip your toes into these experiences. So I'm just foregrounding that what we're talking about is probably quite a longer term kind of developmental trajectory that the students go through. And so this one particular example of research that we've done with colleagues was focusing on reflexivity and real world impact, but really speaking to that discourse of work integrated learning, which probably is quite familiar in your context as well. That idea that, you know, you could say that our partnerships and industry engagement falls in that category, that students get to work on real problems, they get to meet real industry partners. They try to address these challenges, but what we saw in our practice and what we tried to create was this real space of mutual learning. So the idea is that the industry partners are not coming to us to give back to the younger generation or to share the wisdom, but actually they're coming to us with genuine questions. So they have something they want to learn. They have something that is niggling at them that they haven't been able to solve or address. And they come to students with those questions that actually are live questions they are working on in their practice at the same time. So the idea about this transdisciplinary encounter is that we're all learners in that space. We all are there to gain something from it. And students throw in their all, like they give all their effort and thinking, the best thinking and the best approaches. And what we noticed is that actually industry partners keep coming back because they gain something from that experience. So then we interviewed some of the industry partners trying to understand, well, what sort of things or why are they engaging with these young undergraduate students that are studying transdisciplinary degrees and what they're gaining from it. And Susie, if you could flip to the next slide. And so we have this paper in Studies in Continuing Education on mutual learning with external partners. And there's several iterations. So we've done quite a few papers exploring that mutual learning with partners space and seeing what the students gain, what the partners gain, what the educators gain from that engagement in transdisciplinary way. And this particular paper looked at that idea of the practices and the changes that partners then notice and implement in their own organizations after having seen how the students think and how they work, the methodologies that they use across these dimensions of sayings, doings, and relatings. And we could see that even within that one semester encounter, there were actually real shifts that were occurring in partner organizations, and they were beginning to assemble around things differently. They were beginning to work across boundaries. They were asking different kinds of questions, and in a way that student engagement for them was not so much, it was an opportunity to be a bit more free or to create that space in the organization where things could work quite differently. And sometimes students coming in with these quite naive ideas or not understanding the political or historical complexities in organizations, they were actually the ones asking the tricky questions that the partners themselves weren't able to do as employees in organizations. So we explored quite a bit in that space in terms of the mutual learning and how that occurs in our program. So there's a few papers there. And Susie, over to you.
So one of the other key elements, particularly within the first sort of years, but really through across and in the BCI, but also applies within the TD Electives program, is around the collaboration and integration of diverse perspectives and knowledges. And one of the tools that we have developed to support this, which I can actually share the link to after the in the discussion, is a Creative Commons based tool called the Perspective Relay. And we invited different people to create I guess different legs based on their disciplinary perspective, and then invite students to go out into an urban area or other areas and use those perspective cards or sheets of paper to see the city or that particular space in different ways, inviting them using a fashion perspective or a surveillance perspective or a urban design through sound perspective, and listening and then creating almost a musical score that goes alongside it. And part of that is to just really get the learners into different ways of thinking and seeing, and then providing sense-making sessions to integrate those different perspectives based on the kind of challenge. So for example, within a subject that was working with the city of Parramatta, the students went out to Parramatta, used the perspective relay out there in the challenge space that the partner had shared with them to gain different insights around how to support different communities within that particular space. So they do multiple laps using different perspectives and then come up with different ways and ideas in relation to that. Another key dimension that we embed throughout is around creativity and adaptation. And so we do also international or studio-based subjects with students. So in this one, a particular subject being the Hunt Run, the students went to Oroville in India and were there for a 2-week residency, exploring that space and learning from different people within that particular site. And we've also thought about that. Obviously, during the pandemic, there were lots of shifts around how one does experiential learning online, and work integrated learning programs that support different experiences and integration internationally as well as locally. One of the subjects I'm super passionate about, and a stream that runs across BCI and all of our subjects, including the TD electives program and our postgraduate offerings, is around the importance and role of futures, supporting future orientations and complexity and systems thinking, and really shifting from that risk-orientated, predictive kind of let's look at signals and predict from that, but really into how do we invite different kinds of imagination, infrastructures, envisioning, and understanding what's emerging in the present, but then taking a more preferable futures and normative values-led approach. How do we imagine what could be possible and backcast from that into the present to create adaptive action plans to support social and environmental flourishing? And a key part of that is a really experience-driven approach. So we invite students to working with an industry or community partner on a challenge such as the future of work or the future of well-being and other elements. They design an experiential future showcase where they create an exhibition of these different scenarios of possible futures, and people join for that day to feel what that future might be like to help make decisions in the present. So this one was from particular students, and this is 2019, I guess, before ChatGPT and all of that is now a part of our immersive landscape, where they were Oracle Analytica, which was a particular organization, which was an AI-led organization doing diversity hires for humans. And so you had to demonstrate what your humanity would bring to this particular organization through an interview recruitment process. And it was quite hilarious. Another one was Open Office. And in this one, it was around the sharing economy, and you had to engage with a particular role play activity, and as different things were removed, you still had to try and do your different work tasks in this, the dark side of a sharing economy. But there are also preferable futures that they do create, but those are some examples there. So I'm conscious we're keen to, I guess, wrap up at 11:40 for time for discussions and things. So we'll sort of fly through some of the work that we've been doing around the TD capabilities and the alumni survey around that. Giedre.
Yeah, thank you. And Marie was actually part of these conversations already at the conference, so this might be a bit old news, but I think, you know, for the benefit of everyone else. So as part of just reflecting back to those different discourses that we are part of in terms of employability, innovation, and social and environmental impact, at some point we started thinking about our practice and our achievements, and we realized, well, we have a lot of evidence that actually our graduates are developing these really extremely employable skills. So they're, you know, our degrees are result in up to 100% employability for students. We also have this huge interest from industry partners and organizations in working with us. So we have a large network and ecosystem of partnerships with a whole range of different organizations. So we're really definitely playing in that innovation and partnership space. But at some point we were thinking, okay, well, we're creating all these learning experiences. We, as Susie was saying, you know, our aspiration is to create the futures that are better for all of us. But do we know whether the students are actually acquiring the ability to then go out there in the world and start changing it? So on that basis, Susie, if you could flip to the next slide. We then looked at a whole range of different literature, and there's several iterations of this future-oriented capabilities frameworks that Marie would have seen. And we looked at a whole lot of literature at our practice and crystallized these capabilities that pretty much there's a consensus, or that we deemed that through our education practice students develop. So we have systems thinking and foresight, creativity and innovation, collaboration and integration of diverse perspectives, agency, change making and leadership, ethical, sustainable and socially responsible practice, self-awareness and reflexivity, and then practical and technical know-how. So this will look maybe quite similar to other frameworks that you've seen, but on the basis of this framework, we then set out to basically say, okay, if these are the capabilities that students develop as part of our programs, well, how do then they use them in the context where they find themselves upon graduation? And we use that framework as a basis for our theory of change, which followed a kind of probably quite familiar program logic approach, the idea that you have some sort of inputs, and then you have outputs, and then outcomes, and then that result in impact. So in our case, we split the outcomes into micro outcomes, which were to do with individual behaviors. So for example, upon graduation, students are working in an organization, and there's certain kind of behaviors they display that can be associated with each capability. And then we also wanted to look into alumni perceptions of how valuable or how applicable those capabilities were. And then also we were interested in the meso level outcomes. So basically, would these behaviors then change organizational practices in some ways, and whether the organizations would start adopting some of those approaches, which then somehow make this massive leap into the impact space where we change the world and change the society. But that's kind of the best we could do. And on that basis, we built an alumni survey and a research project around it to basically explore what how are graduates applying these capabilities to create impact in their professional lives. And that was a pretty large survey that we developed, and we reached out to 1,000 of our alumni across several degree programs at the university. So the TD school programs, but also Institute for Sustainable Future and some business degrees across undergrad and postgrad space. So we had the survey, we ran focus groups, and we also did some organizational case studies, trying to understand both the individual experience, but also the contextual factors that enabled students to achieve impact or not. And next slide. And among the questions that we asked in the survey was an open question to do with the biggest and most meaningful change or impact that the graduates believe they achieved. And we heard this whole range of different success stories and amazing examples of the kinds of work that our graduates are doing. So they were creating these new, more inclusive practices within their teams and bringing in new tools and ideas into the teams, and they were actually teaching their colleagues about the different transdisciplinary ways of thinking and methodologies that they've learned as part of their degree. And for organizations, that often resulted in new offerings, new services, new tools, new products that were extremely beneficial. And quite often they were done through collaboration across organizational silos. So they were bringing multi-stakeholder groups quite differently to actually come up with those ideas and new services. And in some cases, people were actually working on policies or really large infrastructure projects where they would be creating things that would affect whole populations in Australia, or creating new knowledge that will inform the sector as well. But the one thing that we found in thinking about impact, that idea of super linear kind of like individual practices something and then becomes adopted, and that leads to impact, wasn't quite what was happening. So some graduates were already directly working in the impact space or changing the whole narrative of the sector, and others were just tinkering somewhere at the edges. So we realized we have to think about impact and outcomes quite differently. And Susie will speak a little bit about that. You're on mute, Susie.
Thanks. I've seen lots of really interesting questions come through on the chat that super keen to pick up on, because lots to discuss there. So we'll fly through this so that we can have some time for discussion. But around the impact transition frameworks, drawing on particularly from transition studies and transformation studies, including Giedre's work, multi-level perspective, O'Brien and Signa's work around 3 spheres of transformation and scaling frameworks, thinking about these different ways of thinking about spheres of change. And so the model on the right comes from O'Brien's work from transformation studies work around 3 spheres of transition. We have the personal, political, and practical, but then cutting across that is the outcomes for sustainability, which many of you might be familiar with this particular framework. And so thinking about that within the logics of the alumni survey results, but thinking about that both in terms of social and environmental impact, starting to see how graduates were doing that across those different spheres, whether that's through the impacts of that in the practical space of creating, for example, a new peer workforce, or changing structures and rules by removing old hierarchical roles, or really at that kind of deeper beliefs, values, worldviews, and paradigms levels, a lot of work around shifting the worldviews or mindsets. For example, someone, a graduate working within the prison sector, looking at the use of how one labels inmates and shifting from prisoner to inmate, and changing the labels. So emergent spheres of change and impact, or that some of the key dimensions of that was around increased relationality, cohering and organizing differently, and seeking out meaningful work. So really the emphasis of that, okay, I guess taking through that learning-centered frame with the increased relationality, and ensuring that multiple perspectives and multi-stakeholder engagement for organizing differently, and seeking out deliberately approaching particular partners or clients that have could support the values shifts in the kinds of work that people are doing. So the final kind of piece we wanted to share was just around scaling transformations and transitions in TD higher education through the higher education research and development special issue that Giedre and I are co-editing. And so the papers are under review, they're under their 2nd round of reviews at the moment, and super interesting to see across internationally the different kinds of research and work that people are doing within this space. And these are some of the key themes that have been emerging for us across all of the different submissions that we're moving forward with around embodied approaches, work integrated learning, adaptive guidance, the capabilities such as systems thinking and suiting futuring, student and staff activism approaches, the differences across different geographical areas. For example, student-led work in China, quite different to the kinds of work happening in the UK, or different initiatives within Canada around organizational university funding, and how to navigate that through decolonial approaches, and integrating Indigenous ways of knowing in education. And again, that piece around what are the future visions of academic institutions from decolonization, degrowth, care, and other pieces. So that's us. Thank you so much. And